I'm John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Thought Leadership Series with the Graduate School of Management at UC Davis. We are exploring the ideas, the passions, and the motivations of some of the professors here. Today we're going to talk about technology management with Andrew Hargadon. He is a professor at UC Davis for 22 years. He actually did a 3-year stint as a product designer for Apple Computer back in the early 90s. His PhD is from Stanford School of Engineering. He's the founding, faculty director of, I'm going to get this name right, Mike and Renee Child Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and also the founding faculty director of the Energy and Efficiency Institute. Tell me why you became an academic. What was it about academia that really made you embrace it and leave Apple Computer?
Yeah, that's a long story and a short story. The short story is I grew up with an academic family and in an academic community. So I was raised in the 70s at Stanford, and to know the lure of academia, it was a community where even the adults were constantly curious and questioning things and exploring new things. And my classmates' parents had won Nobels, and my best friend's father had invented a laser. So
oh wow,
these were it was a great community.
Yeah.
And it's much like family farming. You're called back to it. Every season when fall comes around, and you sort of feel the pull of an academic lifestyle. But more also was when you come away from that culture, you want to spend a lot of time thinking and exploring the ideas that you're coming across at work. And what I found was as much fun as doing design work and doing the early laptops for Apple. It was taking days, nights, weekends, and there wasn't much time to step back and think, what are we doing here? Why are we doing it? What could we be doing differently? What am I learning? You're learning from a fire hose, which doesn't give you much time to think. And I started teaching in the design program. I came out of the product design program, and I started teaching one of the intro courses to it.
At Stanford.
Mm-hmm. and was having such a good time that my former advisor and mentor, Jim Adams, called me up and said, "Hey, we got this great PhD program. If I know you, you're probably 2 or 3 years away from a mortgage and promotion, and you'll never come back. So now's the time." And he was right. And so I came back and started a wonderful PhD program funded by the Sloan Foundation that was a business and engineering joint program. So we studied not only the engineering challenges, but also the business challenges behind the engineering challenges, or vice versa. And it just, one thing led to another, and not only was I I got an engineering PhD, but I ended up in a business school where those two challenges come together, and I can study them and talk about them under technology management or innovation.
What was your dissertation on?
My dissertation was actually on how a particular kind of cultural and social setting creates innovative organizations. And it's going to sound a little, they don't have a good reputation necessarily, but it's consultants. So I studied consultants, and particularly we started, my advisor Bob Sutton and I, with IDEO product development.
Sure.
And I had actually worked there while I was getting my master's. I had worked there, and I had taken, and a number of the IDEO folks were my professors at the design program, and then I had ultimately turned around and taught a number of the ones that had come in since then. And we did an ethnography of IDEO, and we studied their brainstorming, and we studied their culture and their project teams and how they manage them. And one of the things that came out of that was the realization that their advantage, their ability to be so innovative at the time, was not that they were highly creative people, individuals, or that they had the recipe, locked in a vault somewhere to be innovative. It was that they were really good at essentially observing, remembering, and recombining what they did. So, so every time they came to a new project, they had, for let's say, each project, they had years of experience with previous clients in different industries and the technologies they used and worked with. So they were constantly saying, you know what might work here? It was that thing we did, the co-injection molding from the toothpaste company, the toothbrush company that we did. We might be able to use that here in this computer, this laptop, to make better cushions and better system.
So they're transferring
constantly
innovative ideas from other industries into
Right.
different ones.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons I really appreciated that was because even at Apple, which was so creative, when I was there, I would call brainstorms, having worked at IDEO, and say, let's get together and try and solve this problem. And it went over like a lead balloon. It just, and it was crazy. 'Cause I had all the paper, I had all the wacky markers, and the
Oh,
M&Ms on the table.
Oh yeah.
And yet, what I realized afterwards, years afterwards, when I was studying IDEO, was I had brought together 5 people who were really smart, but they had all been at Apple for 5 years.
Mm.
And so
that's
everything
all
they
they knew.
was pretty much all they knew.
Yeah.
And all of them knew all of that. So they knew why it
Interesting.
worked and why it didn't, but they could never really think past that, because we're not good at thinking of things that we've never seen before. We're great at thinking of things we have seen before and trying to use them in a different way.
So that has less to do about culture and more to do about the actual work experience that people bring to the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, so one of the big findings of that research was, look, you can have all the offsites you want. You bring in all the
M&Ms.
speakers you want, all the M&Ms you want. I'll bring this.
All the Post-it notes. All the Post-it notes.
All the Post-it notes. But if the people you bring together all know the same thing, not only do they all know the same thing, but they have a culture where your knowledge of the same thing has to be either better or worse than mine.
Right.
We're evaluating ourselves on the very same body of knowledge, and so the opportunity then becomes, with every project that the IDEO designers, and then we looked at it. The same thing was happening at Anderson and McKinsey, and it also at Design Continuum in Boston. Every project is an opportunity to learn from your client, not to give them your knowledge, but actually to go and explore. What are you doing here? Why are you doing that? Who's your vendor there? How did you do that? And so any individual designer's career was contingent on their ability to learn as much from other people as they could, and then share that as often as they could with other people on other problems and other projects.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
So how did your research evolve from there on innovation and entrepreneurship and in the technology business?
So that led to a series of papers and then a book on that area. But one of the things that I had done in that process was actually go back. I had 2 case studies of historical innovations, and I had the opportunity to go to the Menlo Park Research Lab and look at Edison's work. Not necessarily from an organizational perspective, but more from an engineer's perspective.
Right.
And so I had a wonderful tour with the archivists and others, and it was obvious, in fact, that Edison's business, he was a consultant, and so when he started and he started out doing his inventing, most of that was for clients in the telegraph industry and then in other industries that were starting to use electronics for something. And the archivist, he took me downstairs to a bookshelf that had been lovingly recreated with all this stuff. And it was all the past products they had built. So telegraph machines, telegraph repeaters, generators. And you could look at all of them and they were all missing parts. And it's because they would go down and grab that part off of this product to go use somewhere else on a new product.
Yeah.
So they were constantly what they call brokering between projects or between between fields. Which is a long answer to your question, which is that got me really interested in history. Because if you start to, if you don't take history at face value with sort of the record of, kings and wars
Right.
and inventors and things, and you start to look at the work they were actually doing and what they knew at the time based on the patent applications they were filing, and
Right.
the notes in their lab notebooks, and the letters they were writing, and the investor pitches they were making.
So you're looking at the history of innovation, really, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's I'm not wordsmithing here, but it's I would say the history of innovating.
Okay.
What were they thinking when they were doing that?
Interesting.
What were they seeing? And so now I've been doing ethnographies and case studies, but this added an entire new opportunity, which is to go in and look historically at you find a place that's got really rich records and start to question. Well, we know most of what we interpret them as having done comes from 50 years later, looking back. And saying, yeah, that was penicillin, so
Right.
that must have been a brilliant innovation, when in fact, if you go back and look, like Alexander Fleming, he didn't know what he had discovered. That had yet to be made real by others. And it gave me the opportunity then to particularly explore a whole lot more of how we study innovation, because we tend to study it looking backwards. We know the end, so we can guess what happened and fill in the blanks with, this guy must have been a brilliant guy, or pay no attention to the lab assistant.
Or interpret
who,
what we think happened.
Right, exactly.
Right? As opposed to what really happened.
Right. Do our best to understand what they were thinking and doing at the time. So that's so part of that research then led me to studies on Edison and others now about the role of design. So we often think that innovations are so revolutionary they sell themselves, or if you're going to sell them, you're going to sell them on how different they are.
Yeah.
But Edison took enormous pains, and even hobbling his technology in order to make it look just like the gas lighting that was already in the buildings that he was hoping to electrify. And he did that not only for customers but for regulators. He incorporated as a gas company, because that meant immediately he could dig underground in the city streets and bury lines and things.
Right.
Whereas if he had been an electric lighting company, he didn't have those rights. So looking at innovation not as a challenge of doing something that's never been done necessarily, but getting others to accept what has never been done as just like something that you're already doing, so don't worry about it. And that was a sort of a strategic shift that brings design into the innovation process more.
Has the process of innovation changed over the years? Is it exactly the same as it was in Einstein's day?
If you're asking a sort of a layered question, I think people are still doing what they've always done.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way we describe it and the way we prescribe it, if you just go to an airport bookstore, right, and you'll see 5 or 6 books du jour of how to do innovation.
Absolutely.
Those things change everyone. I think there's the rhythm to those, because we sort of return to the same old stuff at time and again. But that's a different layer. That's a layer of, let me tell you how you should do it, versus let me tell you how they did it. They actually did it, what they were doing at the time or thinking at the time. Yeah. So, no, I don't think it's changed, and yet it's constantly changing.
Right. Over the course of all your research in this field, I wonder if there was a real aha moment for you at any given time, and what that might have been.
There are aha moments all the time. You have to. I think one of the wonderful things about being a professor and doing research that you on a topic you really love, you're constantly surprised. The thing is, you don't know whether that aha moment will actually uncover this enormous sort of gold mine of evidence and things that allow you to build something that's real, that you've actually recognized. But also, you don't know whether that's going to resonate with others in the field. So you sort of, it's like innovation. You can come up with the greatest idea, but if nobody else recognizes that, or if it's just you who thinks it's great, it doesn't go anywhere. So you live for the aha moments, but then and then there's the 2 or 5 years of making that into something that's useful for others. Right.
Now, I know you've written a couple books, right?
Right.
What are the major insights of your books?
So the first book, How Breakthroughs Happen, was really developing that story of innovation as a socially situated phenomenon. In other words, we think of somebody as innovative because we haven't seen what they've seen. They don't think they've come up with something brand new. They've recognized that what they did was draw from these other people and move forward. And the problem is we teach our, I use an encyclopedia from when my daughter was in 3rd grade, and she brought it home, that had a list of all the inventors, and they were all men, and they were all, and there was a date beside every one of them. And this was the day that Henry Ford invented the automobile. Or this is the the year. This was the year that Edison invented the light bulb. This is and on and on. And what does that tell people? And so those lessons become really ingrained in us. So that's how we think that's what happens. And so the book was really an attempt to say, don't believe any of that. Here's why Edison was great. Here's
Right.
Here are the notes from Henry Ford going to the meatpacking plant, and here are here's the 5
get
volumes
beyond
of
the year
notes
the Model T came
of the
out.
engineers that went through and measured everything in the Swift meatpacking plant in order to rebuild it in the Ford plant. These kinds of stories get missed.
Right.
And so that book was about how do you create a culture and an organization that builds on what's been done before, but in an innovative way.
And it sounds like you got your insights by studying history.
Partly,
in that
honestly,
book.
by saying this is what people are doing today. Look, they were doing it that way. If you take that lens and go back and look at Edison, you can see that he was doing it that way too.
Right. Or Steve Jobs going to Xerox PARC and coming back with the graphic interface idea.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Elmer Sperry was the other inventor that I looked at in the 1800s, and honestly, he was in the engineering world a bigger celebrity than Edison for a long time.
This is the Sperry of Sperry Rand?
Of Sperry Rand, exactly. Mm-hmm. The gyroscope and for ships and planes and autopilot and all this. And he had a great quote. He said, I invented the gyroscope. I could spend my life making a 5% improvement in the gyroscope. Or I could spend it going into other industries with the gyroscope and making 50, 100% improvements there.
Right.
Why would I want to stay here and add a little bit more to this when I can take it to other people who don't know how to use it yet or haven't found an application for it? And it was a really telling quote, but that's.
And that tends to be the mindset of the inventor, right?
It does.
Who wants to get on to the next thing all the time.
Yeah, but they don't care where they got the idea from. It's like, oh, that's not new. I can't use that.
Right.
So it's fun. I also get the opportunity to show a lot of rock and roll videos.
Why?
Because
why does rock and roll video relate to innovation?
Every great change in rock and roll was really just the combination of these different musics that brought together. Like the Beatles were skiffle and American rock. But you get the musicians are honest. There's a wonderful video.
Honest about where they steal from.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, they call them influences.
Yes.
Or mentors or idols. But they'll say, well, I picked up this intro to the song from Bach, and then but I played it with a 12-string Rickenbacker because that's the sound that George Harrison had, and I wanted that sound. And so they're constantly borrowing from everywhere they go, and it's not a bad life.
Now, I'm sure you studied the 3-part Get Back documentary, which a lot of people have talked about in terms of innovation and seeing the art of creation, the frustration of it, the difficulty of it, and then frankly, the aha moments when things just click and it's almost magical. Right. What's your takeaway from that documentary?
First off, it's just wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Second, I would say that's the creative process.
Yeah.
It's
messy.
Innovation. It's messy, but it's the creative process. One of the things that I have found in my research, and I don't say this is a tremendous discovery. It's going to sound obvious once I say it, but that's the easy part. trying to sell your manager on letting you work on this.
Right.
Trying to sell a venture capitalist, trying to sell an angel investor, trying to sell a co-founder on, hey, I think this could be a business. Why don't we quit our jobs? I have a picture of a kitchen table. And I say, okay, so what has this got to do with innovation? And it's like, and honestly, I had to start it because of projects that people were using in term papers, but it's like, that's the table around which you have to be able to sit and explain to your significant other, your parent, your co-founder, this is why you're taking a second mortgage, or this is why you're quitting your job, and this is why you believe this is the right thing to do. And people don't think about that as anything more than the moment. You make a decision.
Yeah, that's a courageous moment, though.
Yeah, or it's a political moment. And if you can't handle the politics in the company, you can't get your project funded.
True.
And so you've got that aspect. And so, but there's a lot of skills associated with innovation that aren't associated with creativity. And in fact, those are the skills that often get missed until they're too late, or so Peter Drucker, in fact, had a wonderful comment that I don't think got nearly the emphasis it should. He talks about innovation as systematizing a solution. Creativity is coming up with a solution, but innovation is turning it into a system.
Interesting.
So Ray Kroc didn't invent the hamburger,
right?
But he sure built a pretty good system for making money off of hamburgers.
Yes, indeed.
And so thinking about how you build a system around your idea is often much more impactful than the idea itself.
Andrew, how do you think your intellectual journey and what you've discovered along the way has changed you as a person? Has it made you more creative?
I thought I was the creative guy, and that's all I needed to be. It's like, well, just let me come up with a new idea.
Yeah.
And then I realized, that's not how it works. And but some of the things that changed for me, for example, were these. I created the Energy Efficiency Center,
right.
Which I didn't do it by myself, but I was part of a group that did it. What we recognized was an opportunity. A couple grants became available that we were chasing, but it was an opportunity to bring business and engineering together, because energy efficiency isn't really a bleeding edge science. We have about 30 years of backlog knowledge that we haven't gotten full advantage of. So it's more about getting those ideas into technologies that are supported by policies for the right markets. And that meant bringing, systematizing, building a network of people who had the right skills and getting them to come together on a reasonably relative, sort of recurring basis to examine. And that's meant, that was an opportunity to recognize that if we could build these, cross-disciplinary, but also cross-functional. So, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the governor, opened up our center for us. We had, we have the California Energy Commission and the California Air Resources Board, major corporations, major utilities, all needed to be involved because they all needed to be at the table when major technology or policy changes were being made. So it was an opportunity to put my money where my books were, and realize that if you want to be successful, you have to build that network that becomes a system of for processing innovations.
And I see the connective tissue here between your ideas and your discoveries earlier, that, hey, there are things out there that only need to be brought forward, right?
Right.
To make innovation happen.
Right.
You don't have to invent totally new things,
right.
because there's enough stuff going on in the past that hasn't been fully utilized and leveraged.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Andrew, it's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. You've been listening to our professor of technology management, and this is part of the Thought Leadership Series with UC Davis's Graduate School of Management. We're exploring the ideas, the passions, and the motivations of some of the professors here. Thanks for watching.